I'm blown away by his lyrics, music, and I think he has very good choices of ladies and garter belts, which we all love a lot.
Benny Hill, once the king of British comedy, ruled over 140 countries with his slapstick chaos and iconic chase scenes, drawing massive audiences. But what happens when a beloved icon becomes a symbol of outdated humor, so controversial that one lost sketch could end his career? How did a comedian known for light-hearted fun ignite a media firestorm that silenced him for decades? What made a single scene so outrageous that it sparked a nationwide scandal? Benny Hill's downfall is a story of changing times, shifting values, and a comedy style that refused to evolve. The lost scene that sparked outrage. The sketch that changed everything was deceptively simple, a parody of a beauty pageant. On the surface, it seemed like a classic Benny Hill setup. A host making silly, flirtatious comments as contestants walked the stage. But as the cameras rolled, producers quickly sensed something had gone too far. The women contestants were dressed provocatively, barely more than eye candy, and never given lines or jokes of their own. Instead, the focus was entirely on Benny and other male characters making fools of themselves, treating the women as props rather than people. What might have passed as cheeky in the 1960s felt jarringly outdated by the late 1980s. The punchline, involving a wardrobe mishap, landed not as funny, but as cruel and uncomfortable. Laughter on set dimmed, replaced by a nervous silence. For many viewers, this scene crystallized every complaint that had simmered about Benny's brand of humor. It was seen as demeaning and trivializing women's rights. The atmosphere shifted. What was once a light-hearted joke now felt like a mean-spirited jab at a changing world. This sketch became a lightning rod for criticism. Women's groups, media commentators, and even fellow comedians pointed to it as a clear example of why Benny Hill's humor was out of place in modern society. It wasn't just a single bad joke. They argued it symbolized a pattern of objectification that had long been ignored. Television executives and broadcasters suddenly faced a flood of complaints, signaling a public no longer willing to overlook what had once been accepted. The reaction was swift and deafening. Newspapers ran skeptical op-eds asking if material like this should be prime-time entertainment anymore. Feminists used the moment to highlight how pop culture routinely reduced women to indecent objects. It wasn't simply a few voices. A chorus of disapproval echoed across the country and beyond. This backlash marked a stark turning point, signaling that the cultural tide was turning against Hill's style of comedy. People who know him describe him as a person who kept to himself and showed gentle behavior because he did not understand the social changes that had occurred. He maintained his traditional comedic style, which did not meet the changing needs of his audience. The sketch established itself as proof for a cultural divide that had already begun to spread across society. Hill lost control of the situation, which started with the firestorm that actually caused his downfall. The public dispute brought about increased examination of his complete artistic output. People began to view slapstick comedy, which had previously seemed innocent, as a violent form of entertainment. The sketch received critical analysis from reviewers, while a new comedic style was starting to become popular. The new movement abandoned both the traditional slapstick style and the sexist elements that Benny Hill had brought to his performances. The beauty pageant sketch created an offensive experience that started a generational conflict for control over values. Hill's comedy work from the past now faces evaluation to determine its present-day value and effect. The public outcry threatened to destroy Hill's reputation, while it introduced a new era in his life, which brought forth comedians who would reject his traditional performance style. The conflict between these two forces would change the course of British comedy, while it determined Benny Hill's ultimate television destiny. Growing criticism and cultural shifts soon forced everyone to confront a simple truth. Comedy that once ruled the airwaves could no longer hold power without consequence. Early life and comedy roots. Benny Hill, Born Alfred Hawthorne Hill in Southampton, England, in the mid-1920s, came from humble beginnings far removed from the glitz of show business. His father ran a surgical instrument store, a respectable but unglamorous profession, while his grandfather had once been a circus clown. That family connection to performance left a quiet but lasting impression on him, sowing the seeds of a lifelong love for making people laugh. Before he was a comedian, Hill held an array of ordinary jobs, driving cars, delivering milk, stacking shelves in Woolworths, and even playing the drums. While none of these careers seemed destined for stardom, they taught him something invaluable: how to observe people. He learned to catch the little, unnoticed moments that reveal human silliness, a skill that would become the foundation of his unique humor. His talent for watching and mimicking life's quirks turned everyday behavior into comedy gold. World War II shifted Hill's trajectory. He joined the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers as a mechanic, fixing engines and military vehicles. Later, he worked as a driver and searchlight operator, scanning the night skies for enemy planes. Yet, it was his transfer to the Combined Services Entertainment section that unlocked his true calling. Performing for exhausted soldiers in makeshift venues, he realized comedy was more than jokes. It was a vital lifeline in grim times. After the war, Hill honed his skills, inspired by the great British music hall comics who blended slapstick, parody, and clever wit. His greatest influence, however, was American radio legend Jack Benny, whose masterful timing and use of silence fascinated Hill. As a tribute, Alfred Hill adopted Benny as his stage name, signaling the birth of a new comic persona. His first radio show, Variety Bandbox, aired in 1947 and laid the groundwork for his career. But it was clear that radio could not capture the full range of his physical comedy. The 1950s television visual medium provided Hill with an ideal platform to showcase his skills according to their matching qualities. His facial expressions, his slapstick, plus his energetic performance style produced a successful screen adaptation. He demonstrated his acting abilities through serious roles, although he became famous for broad comedy. He played Nick Bottom in a 1964 TV production of Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, which showed his unexpected acting talent. His ability to perform various roles caught critics by surprise, while his comedic performance showed hidden depths beyond his laughter. Hill developed his comedic approach through British music hall traditions, which combined fast-paced sketches with humorous songs and characters who appeared repeatedly. Hill preferred to use body movements, timing, and visual comedy elements while creating humor instead of other comedians who depended on wordplay. His contagious energy created a distinctive style that attracted dedicated fans who wanted to experience his special form of entertainment. The organization experienced continuous development through its ongoing exploration of new strategies. The Benny Hill Show first aired on the BBC in 1955, but achieved its greatest success after moving to Thames Television in 1969. The production shift enabled Hill to create more advanced productions, which required longer shows with higher costs and intricate musical sequences. The show experienced a transformation that changed it from a basic variety show into an influential cultural movement. Hill maintained his observation-based nature, which became his personal trademark through his successful career as he transformed ordinary events into comedy that reached a global audience of millions. He built a detailed world through his dedication to every aspect of production, which created a show that would attract worldwide audience interest, yet become outdated because of upcoming societal shifts. The development of his legacy originated from his early life and his comedy background, which established both his positive and negative aspects. His professional achievements would face their greatest test when British society underwent its transformative cultural changes. His upcoming chapter of life would bring him both extraordinary achievements and increasing public backlash. And understanding the foundation of Benny Hill's comedy helps to frame how he soon became one of the most famous and contentious figures in entertainment history. Rise to stardom. Benny Hill's breakthrough came as television matured into the dominant entertainment medium in the 1950s and 1960s. His brand of visual comedy, combining slapstick and quirky characters, was perfectly suited to the small screen. The Benny Hill Show quickly earned its place as a fresh and fast-paced program in an era dominated by wordplay-heavy humor. Audiences found delight in its rapid-fire sketches, silly songs, and Hill's unmistakable physical energy. Hill's charm was in bringing the spirit of classic British music hall to a modern audience. Where many comedians relied on complex scripts, Hill's humor was universal, pratfalls and sight gags that required no translation. This made his show highly accessible, a factor that would prove vital to its later global appeal. His ability to communicate comedy without words helped the program cross cultural and linguistic barriers effortlessly. By 1969, the move to Thames Television marked a turning point. The show expanded from half-hour segments to one-hour specials, allowing Hill to incorporate more elaborate sets, varied sketches, and elaborate musical numbers. This bigger canvas let Hill experiment with sophisticated production while keeping his trademark zaniness. The new format captivated viewers, and the show's popularity soared. Integral to the show's appeal were memorable characters like Fred Scuttle, the bumbling man who struggled to speak clearly, and Jackie Wright, the diminutive, bald sidekick whose blank expressions amplified Hill's gags. Hill's repeated head taps on Wright became an iconic comedy ritual. These characters added layers and familiarity, turning sketches into recurring delights that audiences eagerly anticipated. The show reached its ultimate climax through its famous chase scenes, which ended with a high-speed chase that used the saxophone jazz composition Yakety Sax as its musical background. The chase scenes used undercranked camera footage to show their intense speed while they showed Hill being pursued by unexpected groups, which included policemen, nurses, and regular street users. The sequence established itself as Benny Hill's comedic signature, which people worldwide recognized as his unique brand of comedy. International syndication propelled Benny Hill to superstar status beyond Britain. By the 1970s, the show was sold to more than 140 countries, and millions tuned in weekly. Its non-verbal humor made it uniquely exportable, and it ranked among Britain's biggest cultural exports ever. The show reached its highest audience size in 1971 when 21 million people watched it on British television. Hill became a cultural icon who used his comedic talent to create entertainment. His Christmas 1971 hit the UK singles chart when he released his comedy song Ernie, the Fastest Milkman in the West. His music, slapstick, and laughter created an appeal to audiences from all different backgrounds. Only a few comedians in history have managed to achieve both critical acclaim and widespread audience popularity. The organization experienced its initial success, yet conflicts already started to emerge between different parties. The elaborate format succeeded in winning viewers but required more resources, which resulted in production expenses that exceeded their budget while simultaneously producing conflicts with new social norms. Hill maintained his position as the top comedian during this time, yet people started to discuss how different cultures should achieve both representation and respect. With the show reaching unprecedented heights, the coming years would challenge Benny Hill's reign in ways no chase scene could outrun. The Benny Hill Show's global success. The Benny Hill Show reached the peak of its popularity in the 1970s, becoming a cultural phenomenon both in Britain and around the world. After moving to Thames Television in 1969, Hill transformed the format from short weekly segments into elaborate one-hour specials. This change allowed him to expand his creative canvas, including elaborate musical numbers, complex parodies, and those now iconic high-speed chase scenes. The increased budget and production values helped turn a quirky variety show into a television landmark. By the mid-1970s, the show had become one of Britain's largest entertainment exports, sold to more than 140 countries. Its universal humor was accessible without the need for language translation, relying heavily on visual comedy, pratfalls, and exaggerated characters. This made the show especially popular overseas, particularly in the United States, where audiences embraced the physical slapstick and catchy music. The simplicity of laughter transcended cultural boundaries, and Benny Hill's show became a global brand. One of the reasons for the show's widespread appeal was its memorable characters. There was Fred Scuttle, the bumbling man with a hopeless way of speaking, and Jackie Wright, Hill's short, bald sidekick, whose blank expression added a special rhythm to the comedy. Hill's repeated head taps on Jackie became an iconic gag loved by viewers who found humor in their unique chemistry. These recurring elements gave viewers a sense of familiarity amidst the rapid-fire sketches. Hill's signature grand finale chase scene gave the show a recognizable signature. Shot with undercranked cameras to speed up the action, the chase featured a menagerie of pursuers, cops, nurses, old ladies, and bikini-clad women, running through parks, streets, and buildings in a frantic pursuit of Hill. The chase was set to Yakety Sax, a blazing saxophone tune that instantly signals comedy for many around the world. It became a beloved trope that cemented Hill's identity in popular culture. The show reached its highest popularity during 1971 when it attracted more than 21 million viewers in the United Kingdom, which made the show one of the most-watched programs in British television history. The Christmas #1 position on the UK singles chart was held by Hill's comedy song Ernie, the Fastest Milkman in the West, which he released during the same year. His achievements in both television and music created a broad fan base because he could connect with different types of audiences. Hill created an entertaining and distinct performance through his combination of slapstick comedy with parody elements and appealing musical tunes. His style started from British music hall traditions, but transformed into a new form that suited television programming. The show maintained viewer interest because of its energetic flow, fast-paced action, and diverse content throughout each week. Hill established new standards for television comedy through his use of physical movements and visual comedy elements, which he performed instead of relying on verbal jokes. The show achieved great success, yet it developed during an era when people started to change their opinions about how society should treat different genders and various social groups. The humor that Hill created attracted millions of viewers, yet some people began to criticize his work. New observers who focused on different cultural trends began to evaluate what had previously been accepted as safe entertainment. The program's popular comedic elements, which brought it success, would face deep examination in the near future. Benny Hill's show achieved global success because of its creative and charming elements. Yet international viewers favored the show until cultural tensions began to rise. The show established its identity through three main elements, which included women wearing revealing clothes while being pursued, using slapstick comedy to create indecent jokes, and producing fast-paced comedic scenes. While the world laughed along, the foundations beneath the show were quietly cracking as social consciousness evolved, preparing the stage for controversy that would eclipse even the show's most famous chase scenes. Growing controversy and cultural shift. By the early 1980s, the cultural landscape around Benny Hill's comedy began to change dramatically. While his show remained a global hit, in Britain the mood was souring. Critics increasingly described his humor as outdated and problematic. The repeated gags featuring suggestively dressed women being chased became a symbol of a past era, clashing with rising feminist movements demanding respect and fairness in media portrayals. For decades, Hill's humor had been dismissed by some as old-fashioned but harmless. However, the rising voices of women's groups, media commentators, and progressive entertainers began to challenge that view. They argued that Hill's brand of comedy reduced women to mere objects for male amusement, reinforcing harmful stereotypes. This critique struck at the core of the show's most enduring imagery and formats. The seminal moment came with the controversial beauty pageant sketch, which crystallized growing unease about the show. What once might have been regarded as cheeky fun now felt increasingly distasteful and mean-spirited. As audiences became more sensitive to issues of gender representation and power dynamics, the laughter gave way to discomfort and criticism. The joke no longer landed, it stung. The backlash was loud and widespread. Newspapers flooded with opinion pieces asking if such content still deserved a spot in prime time. Television networks were swamped with complaints from viewers appalled by the sketch's objectification of women. feminist groups cited the show as an example of how popular culture normalized disrespect and the trivialization of women's experiences. The once celebrated humor was now seen through a harsher and more critical lens. Yet Benny Hill himself appeared unaware of how much the world had shifted. Known as a perfectionist who cared deeply about his craft, he continued producing content in the same vein he always had. His focus remained on timing, detail, and presentation, rather than adapting his themes to changing tastes. This disconnect widened the gulf between Hill and the audiences that once adored him. As the conversation about Hill intensified, a new generation of comedians emerged. Armed with sharper, more political humor, these alternative comics openly rejected the slapstick and stereotypes typical of Hill's show. Their leader, Ben Elton, struck out at Hill with vehement criticism, calling the comedy not just outdated but socially dangerous. Elton argued that the imagery on Hill's show helped perpetuate disrespect and even real-world harm toward women. Elton's bold attack electrified the media and turned whispers into a public debate. Critics who had already grown tired of Hill's jokes magnified Elton's words, framing Benny Hill as not just irrelevant, but damaging. The cultural tide had turned, and the comedy landscape was shifting beneath Hill's feet. What was once welcome escapism was now criticized as harmful reinforcement of inequality. Despite this storm of opposition, Hill still enjoyed widespread popularity internationally, particularly in the United States, where his humor retained its charm for many viewers. Yet, the divide between global fan bases and British critics deepened. At home, the clash between nostalgia for Hill's light-hearted slapstick and the demand for a more respectful cultural climate became impossible to ignore. The controversy made it clear that comedy could no longer exist untouched by cultural transformation. Hill's unique blend of old-school entertainment and bawdy humor was at odds with a society reassessing its values on respect and representation. The stage was set for the final chapter in Benny Hill's television journey, where laughs would be overshadowed by growing calls for change. The alternative comedy movement. As the 1980s progressed, a new wave of comedians emerged in Britain, determined to challenge the old guard of comedy, and Benny Hill quickly became their target. These alternative comedians rejected the slapstick style and gender stereotypes that Hill's show had popularized. Their humor was sharper, more political, and often openly critical of social norms. Leading this movement was Ben Elton, a fast-talking comic and writer whose biting critiques would amplify the cultural battle lines. Ben Elton didn't just criticize Hill's material as outdated, he labeled it dangerous. In public interviews and on-stage performances, Elton argued that the endless chase scenes featuring half-dressed women fostered a culture of disrespect toward women. More than harmless jokes, he claimed, these portrayals encouraged attitudes that could manifest in real-world harm. To Elton, Benny Hill was not merely a relic of a bygone era, but a social menace whose work fueled damaging mindsets. Elton's hard-hitting stance struck a chord with media outlets hungry for controversy. The story quickly escalated into a full-blown cultural war, with critics who were already tired of Hill's repeated gags rallying behind Elton's message. His words gave new voice to long-standing frustrations, turning whispers into a loud crescendo of public disapproval. From this moment, Benny Hill's reputation shifted sharply, from beloved entertainer to lightning rod for backlash. The outspoken alternative comedians represented a broader generational shift, embracing comedy that was more self-aware and socially conscious. Their success came at a time when audiences were craving humor that reflected changing views on equality and power. Hill's style, once the defining sound of British TV comedy, increasingly felt like an uncomfortable reminder of the past. The alternative comedy scene was not only redefining humor, but also reshaping cultural values about who and what deserved to be laughed at. The increasing number of critics who attacked Benny Hill failed to diminish his dedicated following, which continued to support him both in his home country and in foreign nations. His reruns were watched by millions of viewers across the globe, but American audiences showed particular interest in his slapstick performances, which remained popular. The worldwide admiration for Hill created a stark contrast with the increasing animosity that British audiences showed toward him because upcoming comedians demanded new ideas. Defenders of Hill established that he should not face blame for social issues that existed in society. The group viewed Elton's criticisms as an excessive attempt to present moral judgments that compared the responsibility assigned to Benny Hill with the social problems that musicians encounter. People involved in the debate demonstrated a cultural split that existed during the discussion about comedy, because they could not decide whether it served as innocent entertainment or showed actual social problems. The dissonance that existed created a challenging space between entertainment and ethical standards, which Hill's work now occupied. Television regulators began paying closer attention to Hill's shows amid the growing outcry. The Broadcasting Standards Council established stricter rules for content assessment during this time period, when society became less tolerant toward depictions that were considered sexist or outdated. The Benny Hill Show lost its carefree atmosphere, which had existed before, to create a space where people needed to work with both caution and responsibility. The comedy, which had attracted millions of viewers, now needed to observe strict limits. Hill's legacy faced major challenges from the atmosphere, which brought about both difficulties and opportunities. The alternative comedy movement established new standards through its political content and its media industry criticism, which destroyed established boundaries of normal humor. Caught in this new wave of cultural scrutiny, Hill's empire of slapstick and chase scenes was becoming increasingly isolated, his once unshakable fortress showing cracks as new powers rose to claim the throne. Decline and cancellation. By the late 1980s, the Benny Hill Show was feeling the cumulative effects of cultural backlash, shifting tastes, and economic realities. While the show remained a global hit, with millions tuning in to reruns and international broadcasts, its ratings in Britain were slipping. Younger viewers were turning away, seeking fresher, smarter comedy that reflected the era's evolving values, leaving Hill's core audience aging and diminishing. Production costs were another serious challenge. Each one-hour special was an extravagant affair, costing the network around £450,000, equivalent to over $1.5 million today. For 2 decades, Thames Television paid the hefty price because the show was a ratings powerhouse and a major international exporter. But with falling UK viewership and rising criticism, the financial equation shifted dangerously. Public relations became a mounting headache. Networks faced growing pressure from critics, advertisers, and regulatory bodies concerned about the show's content. What had once been celebrated as harmless fun was now seen by many as a PR liability. The controversy over the beauty pageant sketch and other elements painted the show as outdated and potentially harmful, complicating efforts to keep it in prime time. The combination of falling ratings, substantial production costs, and fierce public backlash left Thames Television with little choice. In 1989, after more than 20 years on air, the network abruptly canceled the Benny Hill Show. Though the ban wasn't universal across all television, it was effectively a permanent exile from its longtime home. For Hill, this was a devastating blow. The show was more than a career. It was his life's work. Hill's heartache was profound. Reportedly heartbroken by the cancellation, he resisted simply fading away. In 1991, he attempted a comeback with a new special titled Benny Hill's World Tour, Greetings from New York, aiming to reconnect with his international fan base. Yet, the magic had faded. The show felt like a ghost of its former self, lacking the energy and relevance that once made it great. Away from the spotlight, the real Benny Hill was surprisingly different from his on-screen persona. Despite his immense success and millionaire status, he lived quietly and frugally. He never owned a house or a car, instead choosing small rented apartments and walking everywhere. Friends recalled his simple habits, like mending his own clothes and buying discounted groceries, a stark contrast to his flashy television image. Hill's story is a compelling portrait of a man who shone under the spotlight but walked quietly in life's shadows. His decline was about more than just changing tastes. It was a confluence of cultural shifts, industry economics, and generational change. The fall of the Benny Hill Show marked the end of an era, a chapter where laughter and controversy collided unforgettably. Even the largest empires built on laughter can crumble when the ground beneath them shifts too far out of reach. Life after the show and legacy. After his show was canceled, Benny Hill gradually faded from the spotlight, though his legacy remained complicated. Once beloved around the world, his style of humor struggled to connect with a culture that was rapidly changing. His 1991 comeback special, Benny Hill's World Tour, Greetings from New York, failed to revive his earlier success, with critics and audiences feeling that his comedy no longer fit the times. Off-screen, Hill was known to be quiet, shy, and extremely frugal. Despite earning millions, he lived modestly and avoided the glamorous lifestyle many expected. Friends often described him as humble, a sharp contrast to his exaggerated, mischievous on-screen persona. This contrast revealed the difference between the man himself and the character he portrayed. During his later years, the entertainment industry evolved significantly. Hill, once a dominant force in television comedy, came to represent a fading era. His mastery of slapstick and visual timing influenced generations of comedians, leaving a lasting mark on physical comedy. Opinions about Hill remain divided. Admirers see him as a comic genius, whose humor was lighthearted and universal, while critics argue that parts of his work relied on outdated stereotypes. His story reflects a broader debate in comedy, balancing tradition with modern values. Even today, reruns and online clips keep his distinctive style alive. Benny Hill's journey reminds us how comedy can both unite and divide, reflecting changing times and values. From global superstardom to a controversial fall, his story is a powerful example of how the entertainment world evolves. If you found this story fascinating, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video on your screen. It's another deep dive into comedy's most iconic legends and unforgettable moments you won't want to miss.